Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first show of the Plug and Play podcast of the year 2025. That's right, we're a quarter of the way through the century, and video games are as bright as ever. This episode, we're going to be doing something big, something anticipated for a whole year. We're going to review the Fantasy Critic results, who the winners were, who the losers were, and everything in between. We're going to go through all the games. We're going to see, how they reviewed, what points were gained, lost, and the upsets, the lucky picks. There's a lot of fun stuff that goes into Fantasy Critic, and I really love dissecting the reviews for each game and how they review and why they review the way they do. It's interesting, it's fun, it's exciting, and we're going to be doing it all today. Also, we have impressions for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, reviewed very positively, but what were my takes? What did I think? Well, I'm going to tell you after the Fantasy Critic update. That'd be pretty cool, so stick around for that. But before we get into that, why don't you give us a like? Why don't you give us a review? Why don't you tell us what you love about the Plug and Play podcast? You can do it anywhere. You can do it anywhere. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on a couple of services that I don't even know. Podcast Addict, I think, is one. Apparently, people listen there, according to my analytics. So we're out there, people, and we want to hear what you think. We want to hear if you love us, if you hate us. Please love us. Don't hate us. That would be appreciated. And why don't you leave a comment, send us a question. I mean, I keep asking, but plug in play podcast1@gmail.com. It's in the description if it's too much for you to remember. We got timestamps down there too. Labor of love we put in. I think people like them. I appreciate them, so I do it for you. And I think that's most of the housekeeping. But segueing, Merry Christmas. I don't think I got to say it on the day. I've said it before, but I hope you had a happy holidays. Hope you got a lot of video games under the tree, and I hope Santa was good to you. The way that Santa works for me now is I buy all the gifts from Santa, from Santa to me, because I know how to get better deals than Santa on the internet now for video games. I also know the going rates for most video games because I keep an eye on that stuff to see if I can get a good deal. So, I buy all the video games, and then Christmas Day comes around and I receive all the video games and reimbursement for those video games. So I do still get a lot of video games for myself, but I get a very big influx on the Christmas season. This year, I was very fortunate in finding a lot of good deals for Santa. A lot of fun games I'm looking forward to playing and hopefully discussing here on the podcast. But the big gift that I was really excited about is one I kind of want to discuss a little bit prior to getting into it, which is the MetaQuest. MetaQuest 3S, actually. So if you don't know, MetaQuest is Facebook's VR headset, and they're really pushing it. They literally changed the name of their company from Facebook to Meta to, kind of push forward the idea of we are 110% down on this whole metaverse thing, and the metaverse really can't exist, at least in the capacity that they are looking for it to exist, without a virtual reality or an augmented reality headset, which is what they have now. And VR is always a very pricey investment, and more so, and I've always said this, I'm a big VR guy. I'm not going to say I'm a big VR guy, because I haven't had a VR headset since PlayStation VR 1, but I'm a big VR advocate, is what I prefer to call myself, because I'm I really want VR to succeed. I don't see the need in investing in it right now as a gamer, because what the frick is there really to play? There are games out there. PSVR was not very well supported. The games, I remember PSVR 1, oh my gosh, it was, we all make jokes now, PSVR 2, there's no support, blah, 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 but PSVR 1, there were not, you had Astrobot, and that was it. in terms of like good VR titles for you to play. And then more specifically, like all of the stuff that was released for it outside of like first party Sony like actual VR games was like tech demos. I remember downloading so many free VR like tech demos from companies who were clearly just dabbling in VR and didn't know exactly what they wanted to do with it moving forward, and they made something as kind of like a tech demo to show off to execs as like, this is what we could do, and then they eventually just like never decided to follow up on it for whatever reason, and they were just like, yeah, just put it out. Just put it out for free, like don't even charge anything. Like I remember there was a Danganronpa VR experience that was like, it's only like 5 minutes, but it was like free, and it was like, okay, like why not? I guess I'll try it. I have nothing better to do with this VR headset because it was still very fledgling at the time. Now VR has had a long time to catch up and become a lot more of a mainstream thing. Or I'm not even going to say mainstream. I think it's on the track. I think Meta is really kind of pushing it to be that way because, and the reason I decided to invest in it, and the reason I haven't in a long time, is because, you know, the big headsets that really were worth buying, you know, you had your Valve headset, so you get Half-Life Alyx. You had your PSVR 2 headset, so you could get, you know, Sony IP, like the Horizon game that came out for that, and or like a Resident Evil 4 remake, I think is exclusive to the PSVR 2. And then you had MetaQuest, or Oculus, before it was bought and renamed. I think it still does go by Oculus in some places, but I don't know. That's more complicated than it's worth. It's still Oculus, but it is owned by Meta, so it's a MetaQuest. But obviously PSVR 2 was super expensive, and I didn't trust Sony to make IP, so I was like, I'll just sit on it for a while. They never did make IP, so it was probably a good idea that I just sat on it and never picked it up. The Valve Quest, or the Valve headset, is great from what I've heard, but like again, the support isn't there. I mean, Valve made one game for it, or technically I think they made a tech demo and Alex, and like that was it. So it's like, what the frick are you really buying it for? Obviously you're buying it for like the PC support of like smaller indie games that are coming out on PC only, because that's the easiest place to release games for indie developers. But, you know, again, I don't know very many of those that are like supposed to be fantastic. And then you have MetaQuest, which is this huge company pushing millions and millions and millions of dollars into it, trying to make it this big deal. And in terms of doing that, they're buying studios to specifically, you know, make these games. Like Sanzaru was a big one. I know Sanzaru is the people who effed up the Sly Cooper franchise, so I'll never frickin' see a game from that again. They made Sly 4 and the Sly Collection and a handful of other smaller games, but they were bought by Facebook and turned into a VR studio, and they actually made one of the highest reviewed VR games ever now, so I guess something worked there. But anyway, pushing for VR development with millions and millions of dollars of backing, willing to go into the hole by millions or billions probably in order to make this thing get off the ground. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's probably the one you would want to invest in, because obviously they're investing in it significantly. Like they have put this, you know, Fortune 500, or probably like, what is it, Facebook? Probably Fortune 50 company, like on the line to make this thing happen. And so it's like, if you're going to get in on anything, get on that. But I've always been like, I don't really want Facebook to take my data. And when I'm kind of a staunch guy on that, and it was like, okay, well, I'm not going to buy it just because they're going to just have more data on me. I really don't want that. And then they eventually, because when you originally had a MetaQuest, you had to make a Facebook account linked to it. If you didn't have a Facebook account, you couldn't use a MetaQuest headset when it initially came out, which is insane to me, that they even, you know, like that they thought they could push that. And eventually became such a privacy concern, they were just like, okay, fine, you can just use any email address you want, it doesn't matter. And I was just like, okay, cool, like I'll just do that. And then like, yeah, you'll have data on me, but it will at least be separate, and maybe using like an account that doesn't do anything else on the internet, or doesn't, you know, won't be as significant of a hit for me and my privacy if that's the case. So sure, I'm sure it's still like not great, but like for what I'd be getting, I thought it was probably a worthwhile investment, because on Black Friday, MetaQuests were about $200. So MetaQuest S's, MetaQuest 3S's were knocked down to $300, which is a pretty good deal for any new headset. And more specifically, they also came with a $75 gift card to whatever place you were buying it for. So it was really $225 for a headset. And then I got like a $75 Amazon credit, which I of course I spend plenty of money on Amazon. I was never concerned about getting that or not using that card. So pretty much was just free money at that point, buying groceries and stuff. So I eventually just pulled the trigger on it. I was like, yeah, the new Batman game looks actually pretty cool. It comes with the new Batman game, which is another $50-$60 that you're saving in just because I know I was going to buy that. So I thought it was a pretty good deal. Thought it was a really, really good deal, actually. And so very excited after Christmas, opened it up. I was looking forward to it. I was having a lot of fun anticipating it, and turned it on. Started updating it, obviously, because every hardware, when you unbox it, you have to connect to the internet and immediately update it. Updated it, and it restarted. Downloaded the update fine, restarted, and the MetaQuest logo just continued to spin and spin and spin. I was like, okay, this is must be a big update. You gotta get the big updates in, because it's been in the box for how long? I don't know. Maybe it's got a large update that they're trying to push. And, 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, 25 minutes later, I'm okay, there's something wrong here. And I start looking around, and I'm like, I don't see much, discussed on the internet about this being an issue. Am I the only one who's ever... It's wonderful when you have an issue that, when you Google it and you look, or you, Google it plus Reddit or whatever, and then, you're like, oh, frick, no one has had this problem. And so, I saw, one or two people talk about it, but it was, nobody had really an answer to it, and it was okay, I guess I'm just going to have to go to customer support. And I went to customer support, and they walked me through it for about 2 or 3 hours, put it into safe mode, reboot it, do a factory reset, blah, 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 blah. And eventually they got to the point where they're like, nah, dude, you just have to send that back in. You bricked it. You bricked that thing. And I was just like, oh, frick. So I had to, of course, get a box, put it in the mail and send it off. And it's going to be a couple of weeks before it even gets to them. And then a couple of weeks before they evaluate it and send it back. And then I get to, actually use it, which is of course I had to waste a day of my life even figuring out that it was broken, and then trying to fix it, troubleshooting it, and then sending it back. And now I have to wait another few weeks to even get it back and then actually use it. Super frustrating. And then after the fact, a day later, of course, Facebook put out a freaking thing and was like, hey, yeah, that update that we pushed right before the Christmas season, right before we people would be opening this for Christmas. Yeah, it's a faulty update that will brick your console, or that will brick your headset if you use it. So don't update your headset, or don't use it for a minute while we are if you've already opened it and it's working, don't update it. And if you haven't updated it at all, don't, because just leave it in the box, because it will just break it. And I was just like, okay, cool. That's awesome that you finally say that, after the holiday season, where I'm sure I am not the only person who had this issue. And of course, a bunch of people on, forums and stuff were like, oh yeah, mine is bricked too. I had to send it back. Even the customer representative that I spoke to about the issue said, no, this happened to mine too. I just got one and it happened to mine. And so I am in the process of getting mine sent back in, and having it refurbished, or sending me a new one. They can't refurbish it. It's just they have to send you a completely new one because it's completely bricked. So it's holy frick. This is such a, there's a lot of horror stories about pushing updates that do horrible things to your console, but the worst time that you can possibly have that happen is the Christmas season, where everybody's going to be opening this as their thing under the tree. And obviously, Facebook can't respond very quickly because I'm sure a lot of people are out of town or not at work specifically during the Christmas season. So, like, what an incredibly disappointing and unfortunate situation, especially for me, because I was impacted, so that makes it really bad. But yeah, a really disappointing start to my holiday season or my Christmas presents opening season. It was like the first thing I wanted to interact with, and I can't. So, but it seemed interesting from the startup screen. So there are my impressions. There are my impressions of the MetaQuest 3S. It's bricked, and I had to send it back in, and it was really, really annoying. And like it used to be when I was a kid, dealing with that kind of a thing wasn't that big of a deal. Like having to send it back in and wait 2 weeks or whatever, because I had so much time. Right? As I get older, it's like, bro, I just spent an entire day dealing with this. Like that's a massive commitment. I have to wait another 2 to 4 weeks to get this thing even back in my hands so I can use it. That's 2 to 4 weeks I could have been plowing through this thing and like making progress playing the games that I wanted to play. Like, I mean, I got plenty of stuff in the backlog, let's be real, but like, bro, like it just, that really irked me. Like, my time is so valuable now. It's so valuable. And like having to waste an entire day really ticked me off, especially after the holidays where like I haven't had time to do freaking anything anyway, that I like playing video games, something that like I want to do. Like I've been obviously like having to do a lot of other things because it's the holidays. So, you know, it's very, very frustrating to have that first time you sit down in a while to like just kind of have fun, to be like, you just get effed. You know, you don't want that. So yeah, I look forward to talking about the MetaQuest 3S in the future, but I can't do it now. So that is my update outside of the norm. But let's get into some fun stuff. Let's get into real fun stuff, at least to me. I love Fantasy Critic. I really, really enjoy it. It's one of those things that I really never understood, because as a gamer, as somebody who doesn't give a frick about sports, my two previous co-hosts, who we're going to be getting into in a minute, because they were in this league, both like sports a lot. And I don't care about it at all. And, you know, I have a lot of friends who do, obviously. And so fantasy football leagues are very popular. And I've never understood it. I've been like, this is dumb. Like, I couldn't understand why anybody would give a frick about speculating on how something in the future would play out, in, you know, a sport or any kind of, you know, like anything that's supposed to be just fun. Like, I just never understood it. It just didn't click with me at all. And then Fantasy Critic came around, and I've always been interested in reviews for games, because, you know, you can play a game and your opinion can be completely different than the general consensus around what a group of people think. And, you know, like, why did they think that, and why am I so different? And, you know, I think especially in gaming, there's a weird gap, and I think it's been discussed over many, many years, of how specifically game journalists think and how the gaming populace thinks, and trying to predict that. Because, like, let's be real, like, there is an element, and I think Fantasy Critic this year kind of taught me, for the most part, this is honestly, like, most reviewers are pretty on point with what I think. Like, I'm not going to lie, most of them, it's normally understandable why they review a game the way they do. And, you know, most of the time I look at them and, you know, before I've played a game, because that's when I look at reviews the most, is before I play it in order to make a decision on whether to buy it. You know, like, okay, is this a good game or a bad game? Should I buy it or not? And now going in and, like, constantly always evaluating these scores and watching why and how they're, you know, saying things, because I'm following it for Fantasy Critic purposes, you know, I'm like, okay, no, like, I kind of agree with most of this. Like, in terms of the general number of what people are giving, I kind of get it. Like, it's not, like, too far off, but I do think that there are definitely circumstances that stand out that I look at and I'm like, okay, that's not what really this game should be scoring. Like, that's really, let's be real, that's maybe a little too high, that's maybe a little too low. Like, there's clearly some bias here that's really influencing how this game is scoring. You go back and think about it from like a rear view perspective months later, and you're like, okay, yeah, I think that was just, there were journalists that were swept up in hype and they reviewed it very high, or there's a bias towards this company, and yeah, like that really shouldn't have been that way, or whatever the case is. And you see some instances where that's definitely like weird in how things turned out. But yeah, Fantasy Critic gives you a really interesting outlet in trying to predict that, and it's so difficult. It ultimately just comes down to chance, and not only because you're predicting what journalists are going to think, but you're predicting how a game is going to be before you even play it. And there's so many factors that can go into that, whether a game has a really bad launch, which we're certainly going to get into in this fantasy league, or whether this developer had a lot of issues in a certain way, or some ideas just didn't pan out the way that they were showing, or maybe a game had really bad marketing that made it look really bad and it turned out to be really good. That can happen too, and it happened here in this league. So like, it's or a game is going to get delayed, so like into another year, which means it's not eligible for Fantasy Critic in this particular cycle. So like, you get 0 points. Yeah, it's really fascinating to me. I've obviously just gone on for way too long just talking about that. So it's I really enjoy it. Like, I really just get amped talking about it and dealing with it throughout the year. So at the top, let's go over the rules for Fantasy Critic, okay? Every league has different rules, and ours, we kind of went vanilla for the most part. We had all just it was our first year for a lot of us, and we wanted to just kind of take it easy, nothing crazy, and so no house rules here or anything, and most of the default rules for Fantasy Critic we kind of just used. So in terms of Fantasy Critic, we drafted 18 games. One of them was an unannounced game. That was a special rule that we had. It was one of them had to be unannounced, more so just kind of fun, because you don't even know if that's going to come out or not. I was honestly expecting that to be a lot spicier. We went only one of them didn't come out for the ones that we chose, but like, that was just kind of a spicy, fun little extra slot that we were all supposed to just kind of predict a game that came out, and if it did, you got points. If it didn't, you didn't. And then we had 4 counter picks, 2 of which that we had to do on draft night, and 2 of which that we had to do throughout the year. So we chose 2 after, at some point throughout the year, we just chose another 2. So in terms of regular picks, if you get a 70 or above, so a 70 is 0 points, 71 is 1 point, and so on and so forth. If you get a 91, so anything over a 90, it becomes double points plus whatever the 90 was plus that in double points. So in other words, if you got a 90, it would be 20 points. If you got a 91, it would be 22 points, because that 90 would be that 91, that one extra point in the review would be doubled. And then the counter picks are really where the fun comes in, because you're choosing a game that you think is not going to perform well. So every point above 70, you lose a point. And every point below 70, you gain a point. So you can it's really, really difficult, because obviously most people are trying to pick games that are going to score well. So like, you have to choose the ones that you think somebody made a bad mistake on picking up. So those are the basic rules. We could not drop unreleased games. So if a game got pushed into 2025, this was for the 2024 calendar year. So if it got pushed into 2025, you just got 0 points. That slot was basically unusable, and you could not drop it. Yeah, I was in another league where you could drop games that did not release, and it makes for a lot more interesting of a time, because so many games get delayed. Like, you're bound to be hit by it. But like, admittedly, Alexis did not. Like, all of his games came out. He's the only one who that happened to, and for me, I got totally screwed by it. 4 of my games didn't come out. So 4 of my slots were just complete and utter zeros, which really hurt me as the year went on. But obvious elephant in the room before we go through the scores. Cameron, our beloved co-host, had a lot going on in the second half of the year, and so his list is incomplete. So he had two slots that he did not fill, and then he had one counter pick that he didn't fill. I will be a generous god as the league manager, and just for record purposes, I'm going to give him 10 points for each slot that he didn't fill, and then an unfilled counterpick slot is by default negative 15 points to try and encourage you to not just leave counterpick slots closed or open. So I'm going to just scrub that, and I'm just going to, since I had so many games that didn't release, I think it would have been really easy to just counterpick one of my games towards the end of the year that wasn't going to release, and he would have gotten a 0. So I'm just going to give him a negative or a 0 on that, and then I'm going to give him a plus 10 for both. So you're welcome. So now we get into it. The real nitty-gritty. The fun. Who is the winner? Well, let's just go. Of course it's me. Of course it's me. I'm the winner. I always knew it from the beginning. Yeah, even with 4 slots that were completely left empty, I still polished these guys off. Just kidding. Actually, it was a pretty close matchup by the end of the year between me and Alexis. Cameron, not so much. So from the bottom, with Cameron's adjusted points, as I just mentioned, Cameron gained 114 points, putting him in 3rd place. Alexis had 182 points. So the gap between 2nd and 3rd was substantial. About a 70 point difference, which is huge. Massive, I would say. And then, of course, I came in first with 194 points. So, again, a pretty close game between me and Alexis, a 12-point game, and that really just could have come down to any game, really. If any of my games, or 1 or 2 of my games hadn't done as well as they did, I mean, like, it's very possible that Alexis could have beat me out. But I think both of our lists are fairly interesting in that way. We mostly chose bigger games. So I'm going to go through each and everyone's list, and we're going to break it down. We're going to see what happened here, what possibly could have gone awry, what went right, what went wrong, and see how we can break this down for each game. So we're going to start with Cameron because his list is certainly the most kind of okay, because it's okay, he lost by so much that we really can only say what Cameron did wrong. It's very hard to say what he did right, because a lot of his situations did not turn out very well. But he did have some good picks here. I'm freaking clowning on him so much. I need to pull it back a little bit. But yeah, he did fine. He did fine. A lot of his games were his big problem. I look at his list at a surface level. His big problem here is a lot of his games were lukewarm. A lot of his games were low 70s. A lot of his games did not review anywhere near as well as I think anybody thought they would. I look at a lot of these games and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm kind of surprised at that. Oh yeah, yeah, I really thought that would have done better for him. And it's really hard to see, but a lot of his points a lot of his games didn't get out of the 70s. So let's start here. At the top, his draft picks, his first several were these draft picks were Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2, at an 81. Princess Peach Showtime at a 75. Frostpunk 2 at an 85. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons remake at an 81. Animal Well at an 89. Ayuden Chronicles 100 Heroes at a 76. Star Wars Outlaws at a 75. Oof. F1 24 at a 77. South Park Snow Day at a 60. So he lost 10 points there. Aura History Untold, 74. Bandletel, A League of Legends Story, his very interesting, very respectable pick. Picked with the heart for sure on that one. A 72. Football Manager 2025, 0. It didn't release. which a little bit more on that in a second. Stalker 2, Hearts of Chernobyl, 74. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, 88. That's his best pick. And then SteamWorld Heist, 82. He also, for his unannounced category, he chose unannounced mainline 3D Mario platformer. He chose that early on in the year. A lot of people did, because we assumed the Switch 2 was going to be released towards the end of this year initially, and Nintendo pushed it back. So we're probably about to see an announcement on that. But like, yeah, I've seen other people do that. It's a very bold pick, and like if it had paid off, it would have been huge. But like that slot was really more for fun than anything. Oops, excuse me. But that slot was more fun than anything. So it was a fun little thing he just kind of threw in there. His counter picks were The Plucky Squire, Alexis's Foam Stars, and my Call of Duty Black Ops, which was my unannounced pick. Which I don't think was like a horrible counter pick either. So Plucky Squire was an 82, so he lost 12 points. Foam Stars was a 60, an amazing pickup for a counter pick on draft night there. It gained him 10 points, which is a lot better than most of his actual picks, which is crazy because like the previews for that game were actually pretty solid. So like the fact that it reviewed so poorly is kind of insane. And then Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which was an 83, which I think is really, I mean, that's one of the best reviewing Call of Duty games in a long time. And like, I just picked it because I was like, even if it's a 75, I gained points on an unannounced title. Like, I'm okay with that. And he counterpicked it, assuming it was going to be a very low scoring game, probably like a 75, 77, something like that. And it ended up being an 83. So like, again, one of the better reviewed Call of Duty games in a very long time. So really unfortunate luck for him there. But let's go through the reviews here. So Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 is an 81. I personally think this is highly over-reviewed. I hated that game. And that's like from a guy who actually kind of respects sincerely the first game. The second game, I hated it. I really, really, really did not like it at all. And 81 seems incredibly generous. Incredibly. So I think that is overscored. But like, good for him though. It got more points than I was expecting, at least based on how my impressions of the game. I think before that, I think I was expecting it to score higher. It surprised me it scored that low, and it surprised me it was as poor of a game as I expect, or as it was. So I think he got out okay with that, but it's not what you want for your like first round draft pick. His second was a lot more conservative to me, which was Princess Peach Showtime. Significantly underperformed from what I thought. I thought that game was an easy 80 plus. It's a Nintendo IP. It is the first, well, it's technically the second and the first big Princess Peach game, which major character for Nintendo. So, like, of course, you think they're going to put a lot of emphasis behind it and try to make it great. Didn't happen. 75, so very lukewarm. After playing the game, and I specifically played it because I was so pissed off that game reviewed so low because I have it picked in another league, it is a 75. I'm going to be real. But here's the thing. I'm surprised that it didn't get a Nintendo bump. Nintendo, normally the games that Nintendo makes typically get a lot of praise just for being Nintendo IP. People look at them with rose-colored glasses and really enjoy them just for being Nintendo games. So, like, very surprising that did not happen here. And it was really reviewed probably based on its merit, more so than most Nintendo games, I think. So, very unfortunate for him here. Frostpunk 2, an 85, actually under-reviewed. The first game, I think, is an 88. So, like, this game, surprisingly, normally sequels score a little bit better. So, like, I was expecting this game to easily be an 85 plus. It ended up at an 85, which is still a very good pick. So, like, and I would have picked this game too. I think it was a very safe pick and a very understandable pick. So, Frostpunk 2. Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons remake, an 81. I was definitely expecting that game to do way better. or not way better. I think this game, it probably ended up where it needed to be. I think the original game scored much higher, is why it's a safe pick. But like, I was expecting that game to be an 83 minimum and like an 85 kind of where I wanted it to land, or where I expected it to land, and it ended up being an 81. Not what you really were looking to see here. Again, not a bad pick, but not a great one. Animal Well, his best pick, 89. I was skeptical of Animal Well before it came out. I didn't put any money down on it or I didn't bid on it because I was like, I don't really know how that game's going to be. That's a real wild card. It's interesting. 89 is so high, and yet I don't think people give a frick about it anymore at the end of the year. I think that game came and went pretty quick. I think Animal Well is a very well-designed game, very, very well-designed game. I don't know how much fun I necessarily had while playing it, but like I understand why people like it, and I still think 89 is a little high, but like good for him on the pickup there. Animal Well doing very well this year. Ayuden Chronicles 100 Heroes. We all knew this was a risky one, and you know, over the podcast we've discussed how like Cam is definitely more of he's got a real big soft spot for Sweetkin. And this is from the same guy who did Sweetkin, rest in peace. And it always was going to be a risky one because it was an old school game design philosophy that also was a Kickstarter game, which is just kind of iffy in a lot of ways, like always. Like that's just, you don't want to see that. A Kickstarter game is normally not going to do very well, or is kind of predicted to not do very well just on precedent. But 76 is probably about where this game was going to always end up, but it could have been like a low to mid 80s game if it was, you know, what people really were hoping for. So, you know, he put hope into it, gotta respect that, and it didn't pay out. It just kind of it was a little mediocre at the end of the day, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Star Wars Outlaws. This was one that early on was a real interesting pick. Specifically, it was one that I think a lot of people were not looking forward to. Like the more footage we saw, the more I kind of grew to be like, okay, I think this game is like a mid-80s. Like I think this game could really be something special. Like I thought it was honestly, like I think we even discussed on the podcast, like I saw some footage, I saw some previews for it, and it was like, no, this game actually looks pretty cool. And was expecting that game to hit like mid to low 80s. And dude, no, it absolutely didn't. A lot of people didn't like the design around it. A lot of people thought it was technically a mess, and it tanked in review scores and did not sell very well either. One of the big reasons that Assassin's Creed Shadows got pushed into next year, and that, you know, like Ubisoft is even considering being bought out by Tencent at the moment. So like, no bueno. Again, very surprising that this game scored that low. I think, again, just a real unfortunate situation for Cam there. F124. So Cam put a lot of emphasis in his draft and as he went as being like, well, like I'll just put money on some sports games because I know they're going to come out, and it's not a bad strategy. I know they're going to come out, and a lot of times they review pretty well. Like they review sometimes in like the low 80s, which is like not a bad pick in Fantasy Critic. So he chose F124 and ended up with a 77. So I think a little bit lower than what he wanted, not necessarily too far off, but like a little bit lower than what he wanted. So it was kind of a wet fart of a pick. Then there was South Park Snow Day, which I counterpicked because I was like, no, that game looks like garbage. The problem with it is like Cam thought it was another of the South Park games from Obsidian. So South Park, The Stick of Truth and The Fractured Butthole, it was, you know, he assumed it was going to be one of these well-performing turn-based RPGs, and it's not. It was made by a completely separate studio, and it is like a third-person action game it just never looked very good at all. I'm actually surprised it scored that low. I was expecting maybe high 60s to low 70s, ending up with a 60. It lost him 10 points. So a massive hit there. It's still remember that draft night where he was like, "Oh, frick, like that was the one game I didn't do any research on. I just knew it was the South Park IP, and I just assumed they weren't going to F it up." And it was just like, yeah, it's very different. So, unfortunate, very unfortunate there. This is where he started actually bidding on games and taking them in. Aura History Untold. This is a Xbox IP that is basically a Civilization-like strategy game. And 74. This is actually really surprising to me. I don't normally see these games score very low. I was expecting this game to be easy, like low to mid 80s, and it ended up being low 70s. So like I don't know what happened here. I never followed up on it because it's not a genre that I particularly care about. But like I was at one point eyeing this game as a potential pickup, and I never went through with it. But like I was like, maybe like there's something here, but I just didn't hear any hype around it. I didn't see anybody really pushing for it. So I was like, I guess maybe not. And I guess for the best. I'm very surprised by how low that turned out. Next was Bandle Tale, a League of Legends story. Counterpicked by Alexis. It was a 72. Yeah. Really unfortunate here. I don't know anything about this game, but I do know that Cam was really looking forward to it, and it was kind of his meme pick in a way at the beginning of the year, and yeah, it's unfortunate, but 72 is lower than I think it. Well, I don't know. I don't know anything about the game, so I don't know if it deserved a 72. I guess it did, but it is unfortunate that Cam decided to roll the dice on that one, and it didn't turn up for him. The next is an interesting one. So this is Football Manager 2025, and it's very interesting because this game is called Football Manager 2025. You're like, well, why would you pick it up? It's obviously not coming out in 2024 if 2025 is in the name. That's because it wasn't originally called Football Manager 2025. It was originally called Football Manager 2024. So this was counterpicked by Alexis, and I was just like, interesting that he lucked out on that so hard. Because obviously Alexis was just hoping the game didn't score well. He was expecting probably a low 70s or something. I think that game probably would have scored low 80s. But it ended up just not being released. They changed the name of the game. They changed the name of the game to another year in order to delay it. So like that is just, I mean, you can't fault Cam for that at all. I actually think the Football Manager games normally score pretty well. So like, and the football in general, in terms of football meaning soccer, are normally games that do very well in scores, or are not like risky. Next was Stalker 2, Hearts of Chernobyl. This game had a really rough launch technically. I'm surprised it's not lower. I think this game easily got pity points. Because if you didn't know, Stalker 2 was made by a Ukrainian team. So like this was the big narrative behind this game was, well, they were literally, and this is not something that's like speculated on, like this was a literal thing that was reported on, was this team was literally being bombed while making the game. This game was supposed to be out a while ago, but like the war significantly disrupted their plans to finish the game on time. But this game ended up being a buggy mess. I think it probably deserves a lower. I haven't played it, but like based on everything I've heard, it's like basically broken, but every review I see is just like, well, I don't really want to be too hard on it because they were in the middle of a war. So like, objectivity, I guess, out the window for this one, but it, understandable for the most part, but like still, I was expecting that game to be like high 70s, even with technical issues, because of, a pity bump. But I think with a 74, it shows this game probably is really broken, because like everybody was talking about how they wouldn't do that. I would never review this game super low because they've been getting bombed. So not to dismiss that or like make light of it, but it just in this circumstance I think is a little bit telling. Next was Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. An 88, very well reviewed. Also very interesting because I don't think anybody freaking bought this game. It's very out there, artsy, and very puzzly, very difficult to wrap your head around for a lot of casual players. So like this was never going to be a big seller, but it reviewed incredibly well. 88. It was one game that I actually tried to get, and Cam beat me out on it, actually. So very, very good pick here. I'm surprised it's an 88, especially with the lack of buzz around it. So very, very good pick for him. Unfortunate for me, I didn't get to scoop it up. Next one he also beat me on was Steam World Heist 2. The original game is an 86. This one is an 82. So from what I've heard, it's very similar to the first. So I was expecting this game to be mid to high 80s. I assumed like the SteamWorld devs are known for putting out pretty quality games. So I was assuming this would easily be a mid to high 80s game. And I was very envious of Cam for taking it away, but it ended up being pretty lukewarm. 82 is not bad, certainly, but it's not great either. It's not what I think this game was going to score. So like I think a lot of people looking at reviews are just like, yeah, it's just more of the same. Like this game isn't bad. It's just like they didn't do anything to really make it a better game, and they really punished them for it. Very surprising. I just assumed there was more goodwill behind the IP and like more goodwill behind the original game. So I was completely off there. But again, not a bad pick, but I think it underperformed and it hurt him. So that's all of Cam's stuff. We've already kind of discussed the unannounced Mario 3D platformer and his counter picks. So, it's unfortunate. So, Cam with 114 points. Sorry, buddy. His league name was I'm a gonna win, question mark. Unfortunately, he did not gonna win. He gonna lost. So unfortunate for Cam there. Next, we're going to go over Alexis's list. I think going from bottom to top makes sense. So his was Luminary Light. His publisher name or his team name was Luminary Light. Full list. No games were delayed. He counterpicked 2 delayed games. And then his unannounced game was Astrobot, which was massive. So Astrobot, the highest reviewed game of the year. Basically, anybody who got that game, it's massive. Like it's a massive benefit because it's a 95. So in other words, his points for that were 29, almost 30, and that's a really big deal. It means you got a 90 game, and then essentially you got a whole extra game on top of that, basically. So like it's a really big deal to get Astrobot this year, the highest reviewed game, and by a long shot, and really helps people out. So Astrobot was the big win here, and really helped him out. And so were his counter picks being very, very good. So let's start from the top and go down the list. Number 1, Dragon's Dogma 2 at an 87, Helldivers 2 at an 83, Black Myth Wukong at an 82, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle at an 87, Unicorn Overlord at an 88, Visions of Mana at a 77, Pacific Drive at an 80, Stellar Blade at an 82, Penny's Big Breakaway at a 77, Foam Stars at a 60, Zinless Zone 0 at a 76, Warhammer 40k, Space Marine 2 an 81, Another Crab's Treasure at a 78, Nine Souls at an 85, Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake at an 85, Silent Hill 2 Remake at an 87, Life is Strange Double Exposure at a 71, Astrobot at a 95. His counterpicks were Hollow Knight Silksong. So, I think this was a ballsy one. I'm just going to start with the counter picks since, we're eventually going to get to them on my list, or if we've talked about them already on Cam's. So, like Hollow Knight Silksong, I very much was like, that is a ballsy counter pick at the beginning of the year because this game has been in development for so long. And like we had seen news kind of coming out early in the year that like this was likely to release. Ended up not, because like we basically are, I think people will continue to counterpick this game even into 2025. Even though I think the game will definitely come out in 2025. For some reason, the game continues to get delayed, but it is a meme in the gaming community that this game will never come out. It will never happen. And I think you're a fool to think that it will literally never happen. Like, that's crazy. So, like, Hollow Knight Silksong was a very bold pick. This game was rated in South Korea, which is a normal sign of, like, imminent release if a game is rated, because it means, like, there's not going to be many changes in it, like, in the future, because like they sent it to a rating board, so like that means that it has to be kind of a finalized product, and then store pages were updated and released for the game at the beginning of the year as well. So like it was all but leaning towards like, yeah, this game is 100% coming out this year. And yeah, it didn't. So like he won on that roll. Very, very good on him. The thing is like, why counterpick Hollow Knight Silksong? Because if it comes out, it's like a 90+ guaranteed. So like, why? Like, why are you putting yourself in the line of fire like that? But he doubled down on the meme, and it worked for him. He got 0 points on that counter pick. Bandle Tale, a League of Legends story, a 72, a fantastic counter pick. Knowing nothing about it, I had no idea if this game was going to be good or bad. So like, it was a risk, and he took it, and he won. Football Manager 2025. Again, he didn't even take a risk on this. Like, he knew it was going to come out because it was 2024, like I just said at the time, and it got delayed into 2025. So he lucked out on that counter pick for sure, and he got 0 points for it. Here's one that he took a gamble on, and it did not pay off. UFO 50. So I picked up UFO 50. If you don't know, UFO 50 is one of the higher rated games of the year. It's a 91, so he lost 21 points on UFO 50. Oof. Massive problem there. So I think, a little over halfway through the year, Alexis kind of jumped out of the podcast, kind of felt like he wasn't having as much fun with it anymore, didn't really feel like he wanted to talk about video games as much as he thought, or at least as much anymore. And totally understandable, totally respectable. And, I think he just kind of filled out the last couple of spots on his list, and just kind of like okay, I'll make sure you guys, don't have to worry about me not filling out my list. And like he picked UFO 50 as his counter pick at that point. I think he probably didn't know anything about UFO 50, and if he did, he probably was like, this looks like a garbage retro game. There's no way this is going to be doing very well, and just counterpicked it. And it didn't work out. UFO 50 is from the developers of a lot. So it's 50 individual games in like basically a collection that are new games and that are made by some very talented and very well-respected indie devs. Two that come to mind are Spelunky and Downwell, two very well-respected indie games, and they made a lot of games for this collection. I kind of knew that was going to be a banger just on the fact that the developers involved and the concept behind it was kind of insane in general. So I was like, this game is an easy like 85 plus. Obviously, Alexis didn't think that or didn't know as much about it as I did. Counterpicked it, and it hurt him. And it honestly probably cost him the league. But like I did something similar to that towards the end of the year. So like we kind of evened each other out. So, but still, UFO 50, bad counterpick, ended up being at least. So, unfortunate. Let's go through his games, though, because his games are actually pretty interesting. I really wish, because I can look at Cam's list and be like, I kind of know what Cam did. Like, I know why he did what he did. I look at, like, Alexis's list, and I'm like, those are some interesting picks, and I would love to have him on the podcast to be like, hey, this is why. This is why I chose these games specifically, because I think that some of them are very interesting picks. So starting off, Dragon's Dogma at an 87. I think that's probably, based on what I've seen for the game, probably where it needed to land. But like at the same time, nobody cares about the game towards the end of the year. Like it really just kind of fell off the map. And then I feel like it's just really rewarding it for being a game that nobody cared about when it originally came out. Like the original Dragon's Dogma was like in the 70s. And this is apparently just more Dragon's Dogma 1. Like it's not even really a sequel if you know anything about it. So it's really just more Dragon's Dogma 1, and like just the fact that I guess people played the original and were just like, yeah, I guess I like that now. It's one of those interesting comeback stories for an IP that you really just didn't expect to happen. But like at the same time, like I don't know, people were really expecting that game to review very highly, but I was like, historically it hasn't. So like it's like Demon Souls. Like that original game did not score very well, but then like Dark Souls came out and it was like a huge deal because like the community just told reviewers that it was actually good, and they were just like, yeah, I guess it is. And it's like, okay, you've changed my mind. I went from hating it to liking it. So I understand why it was picked, and it was a huge draft pickup for a lot of people. A lot of people picked up Dragon's Dogma 2 early in the year, and they were rewarded for it. So good for that. Helldivers 2 at an 83. I actually think this game, honestly, I think it deserves the score. I think it's really criminal that a game this big and this unique got a score this low. Like, I think if you've played Helldivers 2 and you've like kind of, if you really critically analyze it, yeah, you'd probably land somewhere in like the mid 80s to maybe low 80s as like that's what the game kind of deserves critically. In terms of clearly what, like people enjoying it and people buying it and people like turning this thing that really never should have been a huge deal into a huge deal, I think that's kind of criminal. It got an 83. Like you think of like this is easily one of the biggest games this year and it's an 83. That's kind of weird. Speaking of which, Black Myth Wukong as an 82. Again, one of the biggest games of this year, and also a game that won a lot of game awards. Gets a lot of best in show community awards and stuff like that. And has an 82, so even lower reviewed, but it was one of the best-selling games of the year. Everything I've seen about that game, though, I'm not impressed by. I don't necessarily care about. It just seems like another action game, a fine action game, but nothing great. And everything I've heard about the game is that, like from people who have reviewed it and stuff, is like, yeah, it's okay, like it's good, but it's not great, if anything. So very surprising at all, like to see that game so. I think, probably where it needs to be reviewed, but like in terms of, the reception to it commercially, that's kind of crazy that it's that low. So kind of a similar situation to Helldivers 2, but the opposite, I suppose. The next is an interesting one as well, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I counterpicked this game, and I did so at the end of the year because I was just like, like this game has not impressed me with its marketing. I'm so far ahead. I really can take a big hit if it ends up being like a high scoring game. Like this is like a game that I have not been impressed by. And I said so throughout the year. I was like, this marketing has been horrible. And I have to think that they're just trying to hide something. So like I eventually was just like, yeah, I'll counterpick it just to be like, yeah, I didn't believe in this game's marketing. I think it's kind of atrocious, and like I'm just gonna counterpick it on principle alone because I was so far ahead towards the end of the year. I was like, yeah, it's whatever. I can take it, and I did, and I took an 87-point hit, and I still won. But anyway, it's reviewed incredibly well. The Metacritic is actually an 86, which I think is closer to what it deserves, and we're gonna get into that in the impressions because I played this game. So if you want to hear more about that, stick around. Unicorn Overlord in 88. I think this is an incredible success. I don't think anybody expected this game to be that good. Vanillaware has a track record in terms of, which is the developer of this game. Obviously, they're known for their beautiful art style, but like I think it's really crazy that it scored so well, because this studio is kind of all over the place in terms of its reviews. So I thought it was an interesting pick. It was a very hardcore strategy game, and I guess it's really good. I played the demo and wasn't really taken in by it, but I was like half asleep when I was playing it. I wasn't enraptured by the story at all, and like I'm not a huge hardcore strategy guy, so like I wasn't expecting this at all. And I think a lot of people were very surprised by very high 80s for this game. So a very good pick. Visions of Mana at a 77. I think this was always an interesting one, and one I really wanted to hear more of his opinions on, because like this game always kind of looked like a mid-70s game. I played the demo just to be sure, and I was like, yeah, this is so mid. Like I can't imagine this game being great. And even like in press releases and stuff, I think we've talked about it, because it's been at several press releases throughout the year on the podcast. I'd love to go back and hear what I said, but I'm sure I said something along the lines of, it looks fine. Like, it looks okay. Like, I don't expect myself to play this. I don't expect a lot of people to play this. And they even shut down the studio that made it the day the game was released. So like, I don't think it was a very big success at all. But like, yeah, 77, it was an interesting pick. Pacific Drive at an 80. This was one big indie game that took a lot of people's interest, and an 80 is lower than what a lot of people were expecting. It's about what I assumed it would get, like probably high 70s was where I was expecting the game, like high 70s, low 80s. It's like right in the middle there. But like, I think a lot of people were expecting more from that game, and it ended up being, I'm not going to say disappointing, but like it mixed in terms of reception. Stellar Blade at an 82. Stellar Blade's an interesting one too, because it's like, okay, like I saw this game and I was like, it looks fine. Like I don't know if I'd pick it up. I anticipate a little bit more from my pickups than like an 82, but I think 82 is probably what Stellar Blade got and deserved as well. Penny's Big Breakaway is 77. This is actually pretty surprising to me. This is from the team that did Sonic Mania. So it is the 2D Sonic game that like people actually say is really good, and like brought back 2D Sonic, and like Sega couldn't do it, but like Sonic Mania could. So I was like, this is clearly a developer that people think has all. I mean, I actually didn't like Sonic Mania. I just don't like 2D Sonic. But like people were like, okay, yeah, like this is a big deal, and I was like, okay, it's clearly a platform developer that appreciates Sonic games, and now they're making a 3D platformer. I'm sure this is going to be very similar to, Sonic Adventure in terms of play style. And not at all. Like, apparently, people did not jive with this game. It got very lukewarm reviews, and 77, I think, it was a tragedy. When I saw that, I was really looking forward to it. I almost picked this game. I almost did. This was one of my lower draft picks as well, and like he picked it up, and I was like, oh frick. I was gonna pick that up, but like, really unfortunate there. Really unfortunate. Foam Stars, holy frick, a 60. So he lost 10 points on this game, which is not what you ever want to see from a pickup ever. At the time, this game was really right around the corner from the draft, and the previews for it were pretty strong, and I was just like, yeah, that's probably a good pick. And I remember Cam counterpicked it, and I was like, interesting choice. Like, I think that's a risk. Ended up getting a 60. And we're gonna get into that in the next one too. But live service games, man, it doesn't matter. Like, they eat your score away if it is just a live service game. And I played Foam Stars, and I was like, this is fine. I played like a round or two, and I just suck at online shooters, so like it was like, okay, whatever. And I bounced off of it pretty fast, but like I liked the idea behind it at the very least, and I like Splatoon. But I'm better at Splatoon because only 4-year-olds play that game. So like I can win a game of Splatoon. But yeah, so speaking of games as a service, his next pick was Zenless Zone Zero. So this is from the studio that did Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail. These are massive games, and Zenless Zone Zero is one of the biggest games of the year. We don't hear about it as a hardcore gaming community, but like this is one of the most profitable games of the year, and like, I mean, I played a little bit of Zenless Zone Zero, and it's good. It's not great, I would say, $76, I think, is a little harsh. And I think, again, it is game reviewers don't like games as a service games. This is clearly a game that has a lot of polish and a lot of stuff that people like. It's just that reviewers are really, really hard on any game with games as a service elements, microtransactions, season passes, the like. So like this game got a 76, and I was not surprised by that because like their previous games hadn't reviewed very well either. Even these games that are known as these monumental giants in the industry. So, I was going to stay away from that game with a 10-foot pole from the very beginning, but I understand why people would think it would review well. Unfortunate there. Warhammer 40K, 81. This is Space Marine 2. This is an interesting one because the original, nobody gave a frick about and didn't really review that well. And then the sequel came out, and people were like, "No, I'm really looking forward to it. Like the hype is super super duper high." And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, where did this massive fan base for the original series come from? Because it certainly nobody gave a frick about it a long time ago, and nobody gave a frick about it like now. So like, why do we care about the sequel at all? But people were really expecting great things from it. I think it got a lot more positive reception than I was expecting. 81 is probably around like the high end for what I thought this game was going to review. And like ultimately like not a bad pick though. Like 80 plus is always like a positive pick for sure. This is one I definitely would have loved to hear his reasoning on was Another Crab's Treasure at a 78. This is one that I actually saw a lot of people picking up. This is a very popular choice. However, I always looked at it and I was like, this looks like an indie Dark Souls game. And guess what? That's probably not going to review great. Because there's going to be jank to it. There's going to be problems with it because it's indie. And like what makes those Dark Souls games so big is they are polished. They are fair. They are these massive experiences with a lot of detail and, like budget. And Another Crab Treasure is not going to be that, and it wasn't that, and so it reviewed about what I expected it to review. Honestly, maybe a little bit higher than what I expected. I thought it was like a mid to low 70s game. So the fact it was a high 70s game kind of surprised me a little bit. But Another Crab's Treasure, interesting pick. Did not pay out massive dividends there. The next few did, though. So 9 Souls, an 85. This is a indie Metroidvania from the developers of Detention, which if you don't know is like an indie horror series. So this is not that at all. It's a 2D platformer action adventure Metroidvania. I think it's an interesting one because there's not a lot of reviews for it. So like it's a little skewed, I think. But like 85 is a really good turnout for it. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be good, and it looked very good, at least. I think it probably is a little high. I think if more people reviewed it, it would go down a couple of points. It'd probably go down to 82, 83. But, I mean, that's not that big of a difference. So, 9 Souls. I haven't heard too much about it outside of the initial hype cycle. But, apparently people think it's good. Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake. I think this was a good pickup, for sure. It was a safe pickup. I think that it had a potential to be a disaster because even in reviews, you'll see people say, like, there's a lot of old school design here that is really not fun. Like, random encounters and being really grindy at times and so on and so forth. And that's what I was really thinking could be a risk there. Towards the end of the year, though, it was one of your better picks because it was so safe. Because, I think a lot of reviewers are going to look at that and be like, I can't... Because, okay, little backstory to Dragon Quest III. It is essentially, like, considered one of the OG greatest, like, JRPGs of all time. I don't really like Dragon Quest. I don't know much about Dragon Quest, and I don't really like the game. I think I played the most recent one. And I really didn't like it. It was too old school for me, too grindy, and I just was like, nah, I'm not about this. And too long. Holy frick, it's way too long. So I bounced off of it pretty quick just to kind of get a taste and got out. Dragon Quest 3 is kind of the guy who kicked off all that stuff. 1 and 2 are considered okay, but 3 is the one that really made that series a masterpiece level situation. So like, I think a lot of game journalists were probably looking at this and being like, I can't review this low. I can't say that Dragon Quest 3 is a bad game. I think there was pressure there. So I think it reviewed pretty well. I was expecting it to be a safe pick in general because of that, but I think it could have probably been higher if it had, taken away the elements of grindiness and old school JRPGs that a lot of people don't like still. But that's what Japanese people still really love, and this game was really for Japanese people, the populace of Japan, because that's their kind of Call of Duty, I guess you could say, is like everybody loves it. So good pick up there. Next was, again, I would love to hear his reasoning for this. Silent Hill 2 Remake, an 87, one of the better reviewed games of the year. Here's the thing, no one thought it was going to be good until it released. Everyone thought this game looked like a trash fire. Even on the podcast, we would all sit around and just be like, yeah, everything we've seen from this game looks so bad. Like, this game looks so bad. And then all of a sudden, Alexis picks it up. I'm like, what the frick is going on here? And then he gets 87 points. Wow. Okay. That's insane. Silent Hill 2 is one of the games that I picked up as my Santa presents. So like, I will be getting around to it eventually, and I'm really looking forward to it now because the game reviewed so well. But like, as we said, like, Bloober Team is this wild card studio that we didn't expect to be doing much, and then like much good, and then like the marketing has been horrific behind it. All the gameplay shown looked really, really bad. Like, wow, it's just like, how this game ended up being good is honestly seems like a miracle to me. Yeah, so good pick up there. Next one, surprising, not so surprising. Life is Strange Double Exposure. This is what seemed to have a lot of hype around it prior to release. First game with Sam coming back as the protagonist for Life is Strange in quite some time, which is the game that a lot of people considered the best in that series. In fact, I consider it to be the only great installment in that series, made by Don't Nod, who I have made a reference to that I don't like Don't Nod very much. I think like they have a really horrible, like really the only game that they ever even touched that was good was Life is Strange. Everything else I think is like pretty meh, if not worse than that, from them. So I just thought that they were going to play it safe and it was going to be fine. Previews for this game were good. I saw people saying this was an easy like 885 kind of game. Looking at previous Life is Strange games, none of the games break 80. So like, you're looking at a series that historically doesn't review very well. But I was like, well, this may be a different one because the hype behind it is definitely going to influence things. And, Sam being back, like, we'll see. Like, this could be a good one. Apparently, the ending of the game is so bad, it tanked all the reviews, which is crazy to me that you can have a game that's fine up until the ending, and then the ending is so bad, you're like, no, I'm going to tank this game's review. Like, that is kind of crazy. Like, this game at one point was like in the 60s. It climbed out of the 60s into the 70s. So he was losing points on it when it originally released. I'm obviously not intending to play this anytime soon. I may touch it when it goes free, but like, apparently the ending is just really, really bad. And even when I heard what the ending was, I was like, I don't really think that ending's like horrible. Like, it could be better, but it's like not horrible. Really unfortunate. really, really unfortunate, and a really horrible pickup that didn't need to be that low, I think. But it's interesting to see it be that low, and maybe if I played it, I would agree. I don't know, but it's interesting to see, for sure. Next is the unannounced title that definitely needs... I'll double down on this, Astrobot. Wow, what a great pickup. Really lucky pickup. I did not expect that. I was really hoping for an Astrobot pickup. He went off of a rumor that was circulating. Jeff Grubb essentially came out at some point in the year and was like, Astrobot's 100% coming out. And he picked it up before it was announced, and very good, very, very good move on him. Rumors have a tendency to kind of go on and off, so I don't always listen to them. But this one was one that easily paid off. And holy frick, yeah. I mean, like that's such a strong pickup, such a good move. It saved so many people's leagues. It's not even funny. So that's everything from Alexis. All total, 182. A very, very commendable score. Very, very. But not as good as my league. That's right. Eternal Slave to the Backlog. That is my publisher name. Because of course I am. And it honestly, I mean, I'll go into it another time, but like, holy frick, yeah, my backlog's crazy. I hate that. It gives me anxiety just looking at it. So Eternal Slave to the Backlog. I had 4 games not release. So, I mean, like if I was in charge, if I was the dictator of Fantasy Critic, my other league that I'm in, you got free drops if the game didn't release. So, like, if you pick something and it ended up getting a release date that was outside of the year, you were good to drop it and move on and pick up another game. And it ends up just making the leagues more interesting because it means that, like, you're always anticipating a score for every game that somebody has. But in this case, I could not do that. Our leagues were vanilla, and we didn't alter that. So if you picked a game that didn't come out, you just got 0 points. And that's what screwed me. Like, I could have done so much better if it was not for the no releases, unfortunately. So let's start from the top. Number 1, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Cha-Chinga 93, Paper Mario 1000 Year Door 89, Hollow Knight Silk Song 0 points, unreleased, Metaphor ReFantazio 92, Microsoft Flight Simulator, this is an interesting one we're definitely going to come back to, 76, Rise of the Ronin 77, Plucky Squire 82, World of Goo 2 82, Rift of the Necrodancer 0 points, unreleased, Mina and the Hollower 0 points, unreleased, The Rise of the Golden Idol 85, Earthblade 0 points, unreleased, Braid Anniversary Edition 89, UFO 50 91, Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom 85, Mario and Luigi Brothership 77, Dragon Age The Veilguard 79, and my unreleased title that I chose at the beginning of the year was Call of Duty Black Ops 6 at an 83. So starting in at the counter picks, my first counter pick was South Park Snow Day, which I gained 10 points on. It ended up getting a 60. Star Wars Outlaws, which 75, so 5 points, which I remember being I was in between counter picking Indiana Jones and Star Wars at the beginning of the year on draft night. And I was like, no, like, I think it's safer to just go with Star Wars Outlaws, even like, and I was really struggling with that counter pick, that second counter pick. Ended up going with Star Wars Outlaws, really paid off much better than I thought. I thought I was going to get hammered on that midway through the year, but it was not bad at all for me. Unannounced Mario 3D platformer. I was thinking we weren't going to counter pick unannounced picks because they were kind of like the throwaway picks per se. Like, obviously a lot of them aren't going to come out. So like, I admittedly, my unannounced pick was I was being very cheeky and very safe. So like, obviously every year a Call of Duty game comes out. So like, I was just like, I know freaking a Call of Duty game is going to come out. So like, I'm just going to pick that as my unannounced game. But like, Cam counterpicked it, and I was just like, oh, I guess we can counterpick games now. And I just counterpicked unannounced Mario 3D platformer because like I knew that wasn't coming out this year because it's not going to come out on the Switch. It's obviously going to come out on the Switch 2, and we know the Switch 2 isn't coming out this year. So it's like, okay, yeah, I'll just freaking counterpicking that, and I got 0 points on it. And then at the very end of the year, I was so far ahead, I was just like, F it. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I am counterpicking Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Ended up getting an 87, harsh, minus 17 points. Oof. So overall, my counter picks were great other than Indiana Jones, which is like why like Alexis and I had pretty comparable counterpicking situations. But like yeah, my counterpicks were pretty solid overall. Even if I did get a little cheeky with the unannounced Mario 3D platformer. But yeah, so at the top, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was my number one pick. I knew this game was going to be stellar. I knew for a fact it was going to be 90 plus. It's very interesting because like I even remember kind of referencing that with Alexis at some point, being like, yeah, I kind of knew. And like he was super into Final Fantasy VII Rebirth too and was really looking forward to it. And I was like, then why did you pick Dragon's Dogma? Like he was first pick. So I was like, why did you pick Dragon's Dogma 2 and not Final Fantasy VII Rebirth? And he was like, well, I just assumed that it wasn't going to be as good. Like I think is something along the lines of what he said is you're like, I just didn't think it was going to be that good. You know, like I thought it was going to be, you know, like a step down. And in all honesty, I think if he was going on reception, if reviews were based on reception, he would be right. I think freaking people didn't buy this game for some reason, and you know, you can go off of, you know, like it was the first game came out during the pandemic and people were just looking for anything, but like people did not really buy this game. Square Enix considered it a significant failure, and I think that 93, based on the comments I've seen on this game, I think a lot of people probably should have reviewed it lower. I see a lot of people complaining about the open world elements and so on and so forth, and like so I mean I didn't like the ending at all, so like it's definitely a divisive game. So it being a 93 is really surprising, but it's about where I expected it to be a 92. The original game reviewed at an 88, and I think that the sentiment around that game only got better as time went on. So as long as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was as good as the original or better, we were going to see a 90-plus game, no shot. So, and that's what ended up happening. I think the game probably should have been reviewed lower, though. I think it was hype and nostalgia that really carried this game's reviews, which I don't think is right, but that is what I was betting on. So, like, it's part of how Fantasy Critic works. Next was Paper Mario 1,000 Year Door Remake. I think this was a very cheeky pick. The fact that it was even allowed to be picked is kind of silly because there's like nothing done to this to change it in any way, shape, or form. It's just basically a re-release. So Nintendo games always score well, and the original scored an 87, actually. So it actually scored better than the original did, which is nothing changed to it. So it's just silly to me that the game even reviewed. Obviously, those extra 2 points are based on nostalgia, the nostalgia for it. So I mean, it was an obvious pick. You know, the original game scored incredibly well, and this is now considered a classic, so like it's obviously going to score great. Again, higher than I expected, but still obviously going to be a good game, or a good score. Next was Hollow Knight Silksong. I was given a lot of crap draft night for even putting this on my list. They were like, oh, it's not going to release. Guess what? It didn't release. Okay, here I am. I'll eat my crow. Like, freaking, I was wrong. It didn't. But there was a lot of things throughout the year that did say it probably would have. So, like, I'm kind of still feeling a little miffed about that. I don't know. But definitely a sad moment for my list here. That's a game that I drafted so high up, didn't even make it into the release at all, and got counterpicked. And like just a big middle finger there, got counterpicked, and the guy didn't lose any points on it because it didn't release. Good pick, Henry. But anyway, next is Metaphor ReFantazio. Metaphor ReFantazio was a 92. This is obviously the biggest JRPG of the year according to the Game Awards. It beat out Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I was expecting easy high scores. I was actually surprised that Alexis didn't take it from me, because it is from the people who make Persona, and he's a Persona fan. We talked about Persona 3 Reload at the beginning of the year, and Persona 3 Reload had already been scored by the time we did this draft and was an 88. So I was like, this is a new IP from the same studio. It's easily guaranteed high 80s. Like, I don't care how like what happens here. It's easily guaranteed high 80s, and now it's a 92. And it's very interesting because, like, I played the demo for it, as I've mentioned here, and I think it's too similar in a lot of ways to Persona, in a way that makes me go like, I don't want, like, I don't really want to play it right now because I just played this massive Persona game like at the beginning of the year. So like I really don't want to play another one of those right now. And like I was expecting this game to not review that high. 92 over 90 seemed silly at the time, but like 92 ended up being very good. So like one of the better picks of the year, and very happy with it in terms of how to review. Next one, not so much. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, a 76. This comes off of the original game being in 90 plus games. So like, what the frick happened here? Microsoft Flight Simulator was one of those things that a lot of the fantasy critic / gaming community kind of got caught off by, because they were like, what the frick? Why is this game scoring so well? Who cares about Microsoft Flight Simulator and it's scoring so well? And then, like, so I was like, yeah, Microsoft Flight Simulator is a guaranteed high 80 plus, like, duh, of course it is. This game's launch was incredibly rocky. Like, it was unplayable for some people. Like, you couldn't even launch it. Like, it was a dumpster fire. And it's a very technical game, so it's like not super surprising. But like, there were several days where like people in the review window couldn't even access the game to review it. So like, because it was so broken, and it's like, okay, yeah, it probably deserves lower scores because of that. So it's very interesting when you go through the reviews and look at it, because literally some people are like, yeah, well, I couldn't even play the game, but I'm sure it's good, so it gets an 80. And it's like, okay, I don't know if you deserve to give that game this score. So I honestly think it's really interesting because it's the review period, If people waited for this game to be fixed, like, it's very likely, and again, it was down for a very long time too at the release window. This could have been easily like a mid-80s game, I think, but because people were having to review it during a window where it was so broken, it got a 76, and it's like, okay. I mean, it's fair, but I think like because it was so broken, I think if that's what you're basing the reviews on, you should definitely review it lower. So like, it's my game, man. Like I want to fight for it, but like I think it honestly reviewed high. But like I was expecting that game to be an easy 90 plus. Like I thought my top 5 picks were easy, all 90 plus games, which or like very high 80s at the very least, and I was right. Outside of obviously the fact that Hollow Knight Silksong didn't release and Microsoft Flight Simulator, pooped the bed. So that was a very interesting fantasy critic. I mean, and it's very interesting because that game came out so late in the year. A lot of leagues were waiting for that to essentially determine the winner of their leagues, because it came out so late, and everybody was expecting massive points from it. So like somebody could jump from third to first in a lot of leagues, and nope, didn't end up happening. That was a pick that just totally ruined a lot of people's leagues, unfortunately. So sad day. Next is Rise of the Ronin at a 77. This is a game that I was very frustrated by underperforming. Every game that this studio has put out, this is the same studio that has made Neo, and a few other action games recently as well. Not as memorable, but like Neo were definitely memorable games. Neo 1 and 2 were considered very, very good. Those games all of their games have been 80 pluses. Their most recent one was like an 81, 82, something like that. But I was expecting like an 81, 82 to mid 80s on this. And it ended up being a 77 because the open world is not very good, and it's kind of like technically poor. And when I say that, I mean like it's like janky. It's not necessarily like Microsoft Flight Simulator where it's like broken. It's just like, oh, well, the graphics here aren't very good, like, something like that. So it's like not like super bad, but like it's funny because everybody that I hear talk about this game actually really likes it. like the game is like has really good combat, and like even though the open world is really archaic, it's like very addictive to go through and check everything off, which like I don't know, I get addicted to that too, but I don't necessarily look for it in games anymore because it's so time consuming, and it just never feels like you get your your reward for that at the end of the game when you spend freaking 40 hours just like clearing bases or whatever the frick. So, anyway, 77 was definitely way lower than what I thought the game was going to score, and I thought it was a safe pick for an 80 plus. Didn't end up happening. So very unfortunate. The Plucky Squire, 82. After playing it, I actually think the game is overrated. I think the game should easily be in like high 70s to mid 70s. I don't think it's like very fun at all. And it's completely carried by its art style. But I was expecting this game to be an 85. So it underperformed based on what I initially thought it would. But after playing it, I think it actually overperformed. So, yeah, I mean, it's still not a horrible pick, though, at 82. You really can't complain. It's just like, again, I assumed that game was going to be an 85. Previews were actually looking pretty good, and then like after I played it, I was like, no, that game kind of sucks. World of Goo 2, 82. The original is actually like an 89 on OpenCritic/Metacritic. It is really, really well reviewed. No one gave a frick about this game, and I think it hurt it. World of Goo 2. An 82. I haven't played it. I don't have much of an intention to play it, but I've heard it does some interesting things. I guess it's just not interesting enough. And it's, from a game that released a long, long time ago on like the Wii. So like it's a long time coming, and it didn't seem to pay off, unfortunately. The next two were not releases. Rift of the Necrodancer, which actually looks pretty cool. I thought that game was like an 85, and then like not happening. A really unfortunate situation because the release cycle for this was actually very interesting. It was pretty much like, oh yeah, we're totally going to release in 2024. And then as the year went on, they were like, 90% chance we'll release in 2025. And it's just like, oh my gosh. So like they were always like assuming they were going to release in 2024, and eventually just like it just didn't end up happening. So it'll be an early release, I assume, for 2025. Mina the Hollower, this got pushed about halfway through the year. It was considered 2024, and then it got pushed. I think that game was going to be high 80s. It's from the same developers of Shovel Knight, so definitely a game to look out for. Rise of the Golden Idol, an 85. The original game is like a 90 on OpenCritic, but nobody reviewed it, so I was like, and this is not a game that I expected to do 90s, so like I was like, yeah, the score's going to go down, but I think it'll still be like low to mid 80s. It ended up being 85, which is actually around where I expected it to land, maybe a little bit higher. But it still looks pretty good, or still a pretty good pickup. Earthblade. This is really unfortunate because I picked it up very earlier in the year. It's from the same developers of Celeste, so probably a good idea to pick it up. And it got delayed like out of 2024 like 2 weeks after I picked it up. It's like immediately. And in this league I can't drop it, so it's just like, well, I should have just not bid on it. Like, like I had no real reason to pick it up, so it's just like F me. Like I guess that shouldn't have been the case. Braid Anniversary Edition, actually reviewed a lot higher than I thought, 89. This game was infamously a massive commercial flop. Nobody bought it. I think it should review lower. I don't think anybody gives a frick about Braid anymore. So it's really surprising to me that it is reviewed higher than like the original, I think. Especially this late, like after it came out. I was expecting good reviews just based on like legacy, but like I didn't expect 89. UFO 50, 91. We've gone through my reasoning on that. Legend of Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom, in 85. I actually thought this under-reviewed based on what I was expecting. I thought this was a high 80s game, Nintendo game, Zelda, same reasoning with Princess Peach. I was like, this is Zelda's first. Like, Peach, it's technically her second, but this is Zelda's her first mainline game that she gets to be in. And looked pretty interesting from what it was trying to do. And 85. I think the Switch is just getting to a point where stuff isn't performing well on it. I think it probably over-reviewed based on what I've heard about it. But this is one of my Christmas gifts as well, so hopefully I'll talk about it at some point in the future. Next is Mario and Luigi Brothership at 77. Holy frick. This is such a hard hit for me. I was like, dude, this is an easy, like, low to mid 80s game. The Mario and Luigi RPG games have always kind of been like iffy on scores. Like the first few scored really, really well, but the most recent ones have never really done very well. But this looked like a complete revamp. Nintendo wasn't very open about who the developer was, but like we later learned it was the same people who made like Triangle Strategy and Octopath Traveler, which is a very like those are series that people kind of like. So like it's not like they were a bad developer. And it looked pretty good in coverage and stuff. So I was like, okay, what the frick? Like this is going to be fine. Like certainly this is going to be. It's a Nintendo IP. Of course it will do well. Nintendo really effed me on that one. As 77, people really didn't like it. To a point where like I will kind of wanted to try it, and then the reviews I was like, no shot. I'm not touching it now. So yeah, that really hurt me. Dragon Age: The Veilguard at a 79. Oof. Another one that I thought was going to do like low to mid 80s. Preview coverage was really, really, really good. The game started off at like an 83 when it released and has been trickling down to a 79. I was like, there's no way this is going to be in the 70s. Well, I was like, it could be. But I was like, after preview coverage, I was like, no, it's got to be great. It's got to be fantastic. People were literally calling it their game of the year and stuff in coverage and in preview coverage, or a potential game of the year. And then like, I think people, honestly, I think this game was bombed for like political purposes. I'm not going to lie. From what I've seen, like everywhere I go on the internet, I see, a lot of these people think it's very too progressive and stuff. I mean, like, I can't really comment. I haven't played much of the game yet. I actually just started it the other day, but only like played an hour or so of it. So I definitely can't comment, but like, I remember, Cam and I, we talked about it. We're both Dragon Age fans, and I'm a longtime Dragon Age fan. And, even though I wasn't necessarily super excited about the Veilguard, I was like, I remember when the game was initially revealed, I was like, this doesn't look bad, but there was a massive backlash to it, gigantic. And, Cam and I kind of went through it on the podcast. We were both like, this game doesn't look bad. Like, it doesn't look bad. It may not look great, but it doesn't look bad. But the reception to it was so poor. And if you look at, there's actually some reviews out there that are like, yeah, F this game. Like, it's like SJW propaganda. And I'm just like, again, I don't know enough about the game to know if that's true or not. But like, there is like a lot of concerns and criticism around it that make people think it's, not a good game. But the trickling down from like an 82, 83 to a 79 over the course of months, that's unlikely. Like normally most reviews come out at the very beginning of the year or a very beginning of the release, and then they don't really change after the fact. So, and there were a lot of reviews for Dragon Age: The Veilguard because it was a big release from a big IP, from a big studio, EA. So like BioWare, like there's a lot riding on it. So the fact that means like a lot of people gave it bad reviews like after the fact. So it's just, I don't know. It's definitely surprising to me. I'm not surprised in the fact that it's a 79, but it's surprising as to the reception I've seen and why some reviews are citing their low scores. And specifically the like how it's trickled down over time. Like that just doesn't make sense. Normally that only happens if the game gets like a bad update or something like that. And Dragon Age: The Veilguard certainly hasn't done that. So like it's interesting. Again, like I wish this game would have done better. Like this was a BioWare's chance at redemption and it just did okay. So like I think it staved off BioWare's execution, but like it's not what I was expecting at all, for sure, based on preview coverage and what I had seen from the game being shown. But anyway, honestly, a very unfortunate couple of notes to end on there for my list. But overall, most of my games did very well. I had several 90 pluses, which is very hard to come by, and my counter picks were overall pretty solid. So like, I'm pretty happy with this list, and it ended up winning me the league. So very, very happy with that, obviously. But I do appreciate Cam and Alexis giving me the opportunity to play this league with them. I really had a lot of fun with it, actually. It was very low stakes league. So I was in another league that was very high stakes, and it freaking drained me. Like I was freaking crunching numbers every night, like seeing if I was doing okay in that league. But like, because it was so highly competitive. But like this league, it was like, yeah, like doesn't really matter if I lose. Like it's cool. Like it's just for fun, and that was cool. So sorry Cam couldn't finish out the league with us this year, but at the end of the day, he is the loser, no matter how you slice it. I think we said we were going to punish the person who lost, but since he's not here, that's pretty difficult. But he would have to. I think the punishment I've seen float around that seems pretty manageable is you have to play the lowest scoring game that you drafted or that you picked up. And in this case, it would be South Park Snow Day for Cam. So if Cam is listening, by all means, report back. Tell me how South Park Snow Day is. We'll see. We'll see moving forward. I would love to continue doing a Fantasy Critic segment of some kind, but it's really hard when it's just me here. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I really enjoy Fantasy Critic. I had a lot of fun playing it this year, and it definitely opens your eyes, because like I think the big takeaway here was like I think going through all of that, you probably heard me say a lot of like that's probably what I expected it to get. That's probably around what I thought. It's not too far off. Blah 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 blah. But like a lot of these games, or only a few of these games, I said that was a real big surprise. Like I didn't see that coming, and I think a lot of these games, if you look at the past history of the developers, if you look at the IP, if you look at, stuff like that, you'll see a trend in how a lot of these games review and why they review, and it's probably expected for a lot of the time. And a lot of times I agree, but there are definitely a few times that I don't, and it's those few times that I don't that are very interesting. Marketing can definitely sway you into thinking a game's going to be good when it's not. That's a big one, and like we've seen examples of both ways. Like obviously Silent Hill looked like it was going to be bad, and then it was good. Like the reverse happens all the time. It's more rare for marketing to be so bad that people think it's going to be a bad game, and then it ends up being a good one. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think it's a fascinating social experiment in determining how games are reviewed and why they're reviewed the way they are prior to being released. But at the end of the day, it's also a lot of luck, because even if a game reviews, like even if journalists act the way you expect them to when reviewing games, you still can't predict a lot of times how a game is actually going to play and the state it will be in when it's released, because marketing is always going to skew the positive. So there's going to be a lot of surprises in a lot of ways, especially if you're not allowed to drop no release titles. You're going to be caught off guard a lot, like me, because I was caught off guard 4 times, which lost me a good number of points. But it is what it is. I can complain all I want, but I still won. Neener. So yeah, that's Fantasy Critic for 2024, the Plug and Play Podcast League. It's been an honor, fellas, and I hope to do it again. Maybe. We'll see. Maybe. Next, we're going to be moving on. Last episode, I did not have any impressions because I was too busy with the holiday season. And this week, I was very scared that I wasn't going to have an impression segment again, which probably wouldn't have been okay because I've been going for like an hour and 45 minutes on just Fantasy Critic. But in this week, I actually found some time. I ran through Indiana Jones and the Great Circle on Game Pass. I have access to it for free, and it was reviewed very, very well. So I was like, I gotta try this, right? So I have already gone into in the Fantasy Critic. This game didn't look good. This game didn't look good from the marketing. And I'm not even going to say it looked bad, but all of the marketing for it was cutscenes. No gameplay at all. Every single time they showed it off, it was a cutscene of Indiana Jones talking, maybe punching people, but never gameplay of it. And to a point where by the time the game released, there had been maybe like 1 or 2 minutes of gameplay shown off for this game in total. It was very funny the last game's trailer. Normally, in a marketing cycle, there's always like a release trailer, essentially, or a launch trailer, and they typically like title it that because it's literally what it's supposed to do is like get you ready for the launch. And in this instance, obviously, the game is coming out in two places. So it's coming out on Xbox this year, or in 2024, and it's coming out on PS5, which obviously was a big deal at the time, in 2025. So they put the trailer out on, for both platforms, one for Xbox and one PS5, and they titled the Xbox One launch trailer, and they titled the PS5 one story trailer, which normally when a developer releases a story trailer, it is because it is only showing off cutscenes. It doesn't show off gameplay. So like I was like, what the frick is this game doing? Like there's no gameplay for it. like why are you not showing gameplay? Like this is clearly a gameplay focused game. Why are we acting like there's no gameplay here? It has to be because this game was horrible. Like it has to be because they are not proud of the gameplay at all, and they only care about, like, the only good thing about this game is that it uses the Indiana Jones IP, and they're very proud of that, and they want to showcase that. And I was like, that has to be it. And so I counterpicked it. I was like, out of principle, they have never shown anything that's worth expecting this game to be good. F it. This game has to be bad. And it's developed by Machine Games, so it's very the people who did the Wolfenstein games, the newest Wolfenstein games, which I actually think Wolfenstein 1 is actually one of my favorite single player shooters like ever. It's got one of my favorite campaigns ever in a single player shooter. And so like I do like Machine Games, but like this was like garbage. This is not that's exaggerative. This did not look like they were very proud of the gameplay in it at all. So then the game came out, and it reviewed really, really well. An 86 on Metacritic, 87 on OpenCritic. And I was blown away by that. All the impressions I was hearing were great. This game was very interesting and different and fun. And I was like, holy frick. Okay, well, I have access to it for free. I'm definitely going to check it out. And so, like, I heard a lot of what really made me interested is there were a lot of really interesting descriptors of it. So I was hearing this is a Dishonor-like. This has Hitman elements in it. It's an open world game. And these like blew my frickin' mind. I was like, why? That's so outside of what I would have expected an Indiana Jones game to be. Like obviously an Indiana Jones game to me, I think to anybody prior to release would have been an obvious like Uncharted style linear action game. Like you were going to be going through corridors, through temples, and shooting people and punching people, I guess, and like finding idols and like, I don't know, punching Nazis in the face. I don't know, that kind of stuff. Like that's what you were going to be doing because that's what in the movies, that's what Indiana Jones does. Which I should also preface, like I don't have any interaction with the Indiana Jones IP. Like the only Indiana Jones game or movie I've seen is Crystal Skull, which is notoriously supposed to be like the worst one. So like I don't have any like love for the Indiana Jones IP. I think it's a fine action series, but I know a lot of it through osmosis. Like who just doesn't know like the scene where Indiana Jones removes, the thing, the weight from that, thing, and then like the boulder chases him and like that's the famous scene, right? Which actually is the opener to this game, which just shows you like this team clearly like loves Indiana Jones. Like the opening scene is like that scene from the movies. But anyway, back to the game itself, not just the attraction to the IP, because I'll get back to that. But overall, I thought that this game was super interesting, and it's very good in a lot of ways, but I'm going to say I have very mixed opinions on several very large elements of the game. So this was a game that I'm going to say I enjoyed, and I think reviews are actually not far off from what I would say they should be, but I will say that like the design of this game is definitely mixed. There are some interesting decisions here that I think could have definitely been fixed in order to, or could have made this game a lot better if they were more cohesive, if they were like better. So now that we've gotten the overview over with, let's get into the nitty gritty. So for starters, this game, what the frick is it? It is an open area / open world game. So like, and I'm going to get into every single one of those things, like the Dishonored like, the Hitman like, and the open world elements. All of those are highly exaggerated in my opinion. And like the fact that people were even using some of those to describe the game is, in my opinion, like misleading. Like because it makes your brain go like, oh frick, like what does that really mean? And it's like, well, I know what they meant, but like it will definitely make you think that this game is like way crazier than it actually is. So like when somebody's like, oh, this is an open world game, it's really like an open area game. You're given 3 small areas to really explore within the game. And then like beyond that, it has like a few like linear missions peppered in where like you're basically just running through a corridor and shooting people. And so like that's kind of like the pacing and structure of it. And I actually was like, when I was first dropped into an open world game or an open world segment or an open area segment, I was like, oh, frick, it was the Vatican. And I was like, this is really frickin' interesting. Like, what the frick are they going to make me do in the Vatican? Like, that's kind of a really cool place to put an action game setting. And, we'll get into it. But, like, it is, again, not as intriguing as, like, once I figured out what the structure was, I was like, oh, like, now that I know I'm not, like, doing Hitman-like stuff and doing Dishonored-like exploration, like, I know that this isn't as interesting as I initially expected it to be. But, like, when I thought, because I had seen no gameplay footage, like I said, of the game, I didn't know what the frick was going to happen in this game. I was completely blind in terms of what the gameplay actually was, and I only heard these, like, crazy explanations as to what it actually is, that, like, I was like, oh man, this could be freaking crazy. And then like by the time I got halfway through the game, I was like, okay, I know what this game is, and I'll let you know when we get there what the exact to that is. But like combat and progression are different than I expected, like I said, in a lot of ways. But ultimately, they have to be praised for trying something different. So like combat is primarily fisticuffs. There's hardly any shooting in this game. Like there is, but it is such an afterthought. It's like not even funny. Your stamina is a massive part of it, of your combat, because you have to obviously manage it when you're throwing punches. Each punch is like a stamina block. And your health is structured differently than I expected as well. You use resources. You permanently lose health, and you have to use resources to get it back. So like it's very early on in the game, pretty like a resource-heavy resource management game, where you're constantly getting hit, and you're like, oh frick, now I have to go find health bandages to like regain my health, and you can like pick up bread and eat bread, and it will give you like extra temporary health, and then you can pick up fruit, and it will give you extra temporary stamina, both of which are like, it's interesting. But at the end of the day, I didn't ever really need to engage with these systems very much. I'm not going to say the game is easy, but like, and I was playing on normal the whole time, but like, I never really felt like the game wanted me to engage with just like going in and like, I guess at the beginning of the game you could, but like there are definitely segments where you're like not supposed to engage in combat at all. And there are definitely segments where you're like absolutely supposed to just beat the frick out of everybody. And in those segments, I never felt like I really needed that much, because the AI is kind of wonky. Because like, okay, there are guns in the game. They don't really come into play until about halfway through the game. So like the first half of the game, you're only fighting people with your fists. And while this is like funny Indiana Jones stuff, but like nobody will pull out a gun and shoot you. Nobody will do it. And if they do, like there's only like one guy. Everybody else is going to just sit there and wait in line to just punch you in the face. And so like as long as you like parry and which like once I got that down, it was like combat was like a non-starter. Like I was like, okay, yeah, I can do anything. Like I'm a god because I can parry everything that everybody does, and then I just punch them in the face and they're all dead. Because nobody's gonna double up on you. Like you can walk into a base of Nazis and like beat the frick out of all of them pretty easily. Not easily, but like you can definitely do it if you're good enough at the combat. Which you don't have to be a master, trust me. So like it made me feel like I didn't need to progress very far in the combat in order to make it or engage with a lot of the systems in order to do anything I really needed to do. Like I was pretty okay with it for the most part. And then like when guns start getting interpreted, like thrown into the mix, it was really weird. Like when, and I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but there's so much I have to say about this game. I feel like it's like when you freaking when you pull out a gun and you shoot somebody, if everybody has a gun, it's now everybody's going to be shooting at you. Like that's how the AI interprets that. It's like, oh, it's now a gunfight. Like okay, we're shooting people, and then like if you never pull out a gun, you will immediately like, or not you immediately, but if you never pull out a gun, nobody will shoot you. Like everybody, even if they have guns, will just sit there and just like get in line for you to punch them. And so it's like, what the frick are you trying to really make me do here? like what systems do I need? So I never really pulled out guns unless the guns were already being used on me. Because like guns, like it was pretty much an instant death sentence. Like guns are pretty powerful in the game, at least enemies. Your guns suck. When you pick up a gun, you suck. Like enemies are bullet sponges. Headshots don't even matter sometimes. It's kind of jank. The shooting is not good. And this is very surprising from Machine Games, who obviously made 2 first-person shooters that people really enjoyed. But like I really did not like the shooting in the game at all. It felt weak. It felt like they were really trying to push the player into being like fisticuff focused. But then when they ended up focusing, like forcing the player to be like a shooter, you had to pick up guns and shoot people, which there are linear segments that basically force you to do that. Like it always felt like oh, I don't give a frick, or it, not that I don't give a frick. It always felt like this shooting is really bad, and like all these enemies are bullet sponges. They don't die easily. These guns don't feel powerful. But then like the enemy's guns like do 1/3 of my freaking health every shot, and like I have to use like resources to get that health back. And like it's, I mean, it was just felt all over the place in terms of what they wanted me to be doing. I never really fully understood what the vision for the combat was. And about halfway through the game, I had all the upgrades I needed to make fisticuffs like good. And so I was just like, okay, I don't really need to engage in the shooting unless otherwise necessary. And it wasn't ever really necessary for the most part. Like for most of the game, you don't ever have to do that. So like, I think the combat again had interesting ideas, but like I really didn't like love most of them in like the full implementation throughout the game. So, you know, like that leads me to say the first like half of this game, I loved it. I loved every minute of it because I was trying to experience it and understand what the game was and kind of decipher like what is the design philosophy behind this, you know, like where is this game going to go with its ideas. And you know, like I don't even care about, you know, like so like the first half of this game, I really loved it. Like I loved every minute of it. I loved exploring it and trying to understand what they were trying to do with this, and more specifically, like how are they trying to pair the Indiana Jones IP with the overall structure of this game design. And about halfway through, as I've mentioned a couple of times, like I figured out exactly what it was. Like I knew what the game was. I knew how they were what they were going to do moving forward with it. And I was just like, oh, now I don't give a frick anymore, which is really unfortunate because I was so ready. If you had, and like I had played a little bit, just a teensy tiny bit, an hour or two of this game prior to the last podcast, and I was considering doing a brief impression segment of it. And if I had, it would have been overwhelmingly positive. I would be saying, I guarantee you, I would have said this game is easily going to make my top games of the year. Like it's really, really, really good, and I can't wait to play more of it. Now I'm really glad that I got through the end of it, because like I said, about halfway, maybe 2/3 of the way through the game, I was just like, okay, I know what this is. Examples of which are the open world aspects. Like early on, I was like, okay, how is this going to work? I eventually figured out it's basically like every other open world game. You have your major missions, obviously. You have your basic, like, little tiny missions that are totally missable, you don't actually need to do. You have your small side missions that are like actually like worth doing, that are called field work, so like those are the ones that are important. And then you have like the little collectibles that are hidden around the environment. And I like 100% of the first area, because I was like, oh, I need everything. Like I need all the XP I can get. I need to find everything, because who knows, it could be really, really important. And then I got to the second area and I was like, oh no, this is the exact same thing. This is the exact same thing, and it's very similar to the first thing. And now I kind of see what the trick is. It's just basically an open world game, like in terms of its structure of missions, and like the missions aren't necessarily super worth doing once you get like halfway through the game, because you have all the skills you need. So like, why engage with this content that isn't necessarily that entertaining in the first place? The Hitman elements people were referencing are just disguises. So you can find disguises throughout the world that will make it so that certain people will not recognize you. So you can essentially walk through certain areas and explore without people shooting at you immediately and freaking trying to stop you from doing that, which I heavily appreciated, because like I don't like... In most of those games, I just kill everybody and then start exploring places, because I'm like, I don't want to be interrupted while I'm exploring. So like, that was the quote-unquote Hitman elements of the game people were talking about, is like putting on a disguise so that certain people in certain areas don't mess with you anymore. And admittedly, that's not what I think of when I think Hitman. I think you're trying to find a target in an environment, in an open area, and like a sandbox, and you have to find them and figure out how to assassinate them in a proper way. Like, that's what I think when I think Hitman. And I don't think about the disguises in which you can basically avoid security by getting a disguise in a certain place. Like, that's not what I think of. So, like, when people say Hitman, I think it's incredibly misleading. And then Dishonored elements. This is baby-level exploration in terms of what I would consider quote-unquote Dishonored elements. And then the resource management and like detailed notes that add like more, lore and stuff like that. So like people and things happening in the world, like picking up bread and bandages for health, and like fruit for stamina and stuff like that. That's what I considered the Dishonored-esque elements of resource gathering and management, finding it in the open world. And this is like, if you consider Dishonored that to be a Dishonored-esque quality, this is like Dishonored like for a toddler, if not an infant. Like, it is baby levels of Dishonored development style. Combat never evolved beyond what you're given in the beginning of the game. So like, you basically are given all elements of the combat and at the very like in the tutorial, and beyond that they are like pretty much that for the rest of the game. Guns are made more prevalent over the course of the game, but not by much. They're never given a focus, so like combat never really goes anywhere beyond what you're initially investing into it. This game is more common, surprisingly, with an Arcane development style than a Machine Games development style. Like, I think that it has more similarities to an Arcane game. And by the way, Arcane was actually the second major studio working on this game. So they were like the B team, kind of helping Machine Games make it. So like that makes sense to me. But this is not like a big shooter, like this is not a big action game per se. It is mostly an exploration, going around, collecting things, not collecting things isn't very Arcane, but it's mostly a shooter, or it's mostly an exploration game where you're just kind of going around from place to place and exploring and, interacting with the environment. All in all, the game has a lot of ideas that it never really knows what to do with. Stealth is kind of an afterthought as well. Combat, obviously, exploration, and puzzles also felt a little underwhelming for me at some point or another. They just kind of get a little samey. I'm also just not a big puzzle guy, but there are a lot of puzzles in this game. But all that being said, I know I just complained a lot. I think that there's definitely some good here. Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's not even, I know that there's some good here. Specifically, this is the Indiana Jones game. Absolutely. Not even close. Like, this is what I almost feel like, as somebody who's never really watched many indie movies, I'm like, this is what Indiana Jones feels like. This is an interactive Indiana Jones movie. That's what this is. I really, really, I think the standout for this game is easily the writing, the story, the villain, and Troy Baker's performance. So basically everything that would make this a movie. Anything that would, if you took out all the gameplay, that's what makes this game really, really good. It feels like an Indiana Jones action romp. Troy Baker, I don't even, like, sometimes I was like, I think they just got Harrison Ford. Like, I think that's just Harrison Ford. They just went back in time, grabbed Harrison Ford off the street when he was young, and just made him play Indiana Jones for this movie. Like, Troy Baker, if you don't know, is the guy he's one of the most legendary video game actors ever. He's, Joel from The Last of Us. He's Booker DeWitt from BioShock Infinite. He's a million other things, and he's always knocked it out of the park. This is add it to the list. This is amazing performance. I think the villain is super fun. Always loved when he was on screen. The story itself is like a fun action romp. I'm not a huge like Uncharted story dude, but like I think this is what an Uncharted story should feel like in terms of like going from place to place. And then the writing, I think, is like right in line with what I think an Indiana Jones classic movie would be written like. It's fun. It is just fun. From beginning to end is a fun adventure. And I think even though I just kind of ragged on the puzzles a little bit, I think exploring and solving puzzles in tombs is like, that's the standout moments from this game. Like, you feel like you're in another moment from like that initial movie scene, where you're, running from boulders and, having to move, things, the weights from traps and, dodge traps and stuff like that. Like, that's what I feel like is definitely the standout moments. It does get a little samey by the end of the game, but like, I still think the first half of the game, I was pretty enamored with it for sure. I was ultimately, a lot of these elements still feel really good. For the first half of the game. For the first half, okay? But it's really unfortunate that the game could not make it interesting for the entirety of it. And I was really rooting for it too. So the reason that is because I can feel the love. I can feel that this team loves Indiana Jones. They really wanted it to be something different and interesting, and I think that they tried to put a lot of ideas in here that I understand, like, what they were thinking. I understand, like, this should have been really, really cool, but it ends up being a little bit lackluster because it's, a lot of these ideas just feel disjointed. They don't feel coherent, and I was really rooting for it. I think I wanted to love this game, and I have to be critical of it in a way that I don't want to be, because I loved a lot of my time with it, just not all of it. This game is definitely still worth a try, especially if you have Game Pass. I would definitely highly recommend it. Just give it a shot. Play a few hours of it. You may not have to finish it, but like, play a few hours of it and see what you think. I'd say if I was... The current Metacritic score is 86, 87, right? I'd say this game still deserves like an 85, 84, like 84 on a bad day. And again, like I've clogged on this game pretty much the entire time I've talked about it, but I still think it's good. I don't think it's great. I think it could have been great. And that's what really makes it super disappointing for me. I wanted it to be great, and it ended up just falling short of greatness for me about halfway through. And I know I just feel like I'm running on repeat here, but like, I really do still like the game. Again, fun action romp, fun time. Especially if you're an Indiana Jones fan. Oh my gosh, like this should be your game of the year. This should be your game of the year if you're an Indiana Jones like diehard, no doubt. But it's hard for me to sit here and say that everything it did was amazing from start to finish. And unfortunately, I think the game is not performing well either. I think from initial rumors and reports, we're seeing that this game it's very difficult to know now because of Game Pass kind of obfuscating numbers. But from what we are kind of gathering is like this game didn't do very well. And I don't know. I mean, I understand why it wouldn't, because it's freaking, the marketing was horrible. I think the Indiana Jones IP is kind of dying on the vine. I think the most recent movie they did was a flop. So like it's hard for me to see this game being a huge success. And because the game's design seems so disjointed, I think it's hard to sell any one person on it. Because, it is so difficult of a sell. How am I supposed to describe what it is? I would say it's an Indiana Jones romp, but if you ask me what the gameplay is like, I'd be like, I don't really know exactly what to say it's like, because it's, and that's why I think you hear all these weird, it's like Hitman, it's like Dishonored, it's not really like any of those. It's not really like any of those, but it's also not like a traditional action game that you would normally just be like, it's like a Far Cry, it's like a XYZ. Like, it doesn't really fit any of those exact buckets. So it's really difficult to sell somebody on, and I think that's why they could have easily shown this game off better, but I think that's probably why they didn't show off the gameplay as much, because there really isn't as much of a definitive, like, this is what this game is, kind of moment in the gameplay where you can really show it off, and I think that really hurts it. I think it really hurts it. Even if the reviews are good for this game, I think, again, Indiana Jones IP being weak and this game just not being able to be shown very easily and talked about very easily is a hurtful thing for the game in terms of marketing and reach. So I think that's all I have to say. I think I rambled about that a little too much, but a lot of cool elements, a lot of disappointing follow through on those elements, I think, is just kind of the main takeaway. But yeah, that's Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I'm really glad I got to play it, though. I really had a good several hours with it before it kind of became a little too samey for me. And yeah, I hope that was a decent listen, because I feel like I jumped around a little bit too much. But it is what it is. I'm not a professional podcaster. I do it for fun. But anyway, I think that's all for this episode. And I want to thank you for listening. And I want to hope that you have a great 2025. And I'm looking forward to going to try to do a Game of the Year episode. I think that's like my final bucket list thing that I'm like, I gotta do that. Still trying to plan it out, still trying to get my thoughts together on what deserves to be where, but really looking forward to that one, and hope you are too, because it'll be a fun one. It'll be a real fun one. And I'm going to start watching GDQ right now. Games Done Quick is happening this week, so if you haven't heard about it, it's basically video game speedruns 24/7 on Twitch for a full week. Goes to a good cause, and it's a lot of fun. I love speedruns. Super fun to watch, especially like for games that I care about. So looking forward to that. So it's going to be a good week. It's going to be a good week, and I hope you have a good one too. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you play some good video games too. Bye-bye.